This is Harun Kareem, your classmate, and this is week 16, Innovation and Diffusion. Innovation, invention, and diffusion. Invention is the process through which original policy ideas are conceived. Innovation is a program that's new to the government adopting it. Diffusion is the process by which an innovation is communicated through certain channels over time among the members of a social system. Adoption of a new policy by government. Despite the extensive number of studies of government innovation, at general level there are two principal explanations for adoption of a new program by a government: internal determinant and diffusion. Internal determinant explanation posit that factors leading a jurisdiction to innovate are political, economic, or social characteristics internal to the jurisdiction. By contrast, diffusion explanations are inherently intergovernmental. They view government adoption by other governments. Diffusion explanation for policy adoption. Policy diffusion occurs if the probability of adoption of a policy by one government jurisdiction is influenced by the policy choices of the governments in the system. For example, stand your ground law first adopted by Florida, now adopted by over a dozen states. The five other explanations for diffusion that diffusion happens through is learning, imitation, pressure, competition, and coercion. Alternative mechanism for diffusion: learning. Learning occurs when policymakers in one jurisdiction derive information about the effectiveness or success of a policy from previously adopting government. It's important to note that effectiveness includes not only meeting policy objectives but also achieving political objectives such as winning re-election. There are conflicting theories about learning as an alternative mechanism for policy diffusion. For example, some theories assume that policymakers are rational and government has thoroughly observed the given policy's effectiveness. Other theories assume that government's ability in processing information about policy's effectiveness is limited. Imitation. Government A imitates government B when A adopts a policy adopted by B simply to look like B. Imitation occurs because policymakers in A perceive B as worthy of emulation, prompting A to adopt any policy that B adopts independently of any evaluation of the character of the policy or its effectiveness. The difference between learning and imitation is that the learning focuses on the action, that is, policy being adopted by another government, while imitation focuses on the actors, the government that is adopting the policy. The problem of imitation is that when one country try to imitate another country, it is either larger in size, wealth, or even has a stronger leader reputation, and therefore they have a high level of credibility in creating good policy. Often, policymakers tend to emulate policy adoption of jurisdictions that share similar partisan and ideological orientation. Normative. Government A succumbs to normative pressure when A adopts a policy not because it's imitating any particular government or learning from the experience of others, but rather because it observed the policy is being widely adopted by other governments, and because of shared norms A chooses to conform. Such shared norms can emerge across societies, allowing some policies, such as women's suffrage movement, to achieve a status of taken for grantedness. Shared norms across jurisdictions are often reinforced by participation of agency personnel and intergovernment professionals associations that constitute networks across which policy can diffuse. Competition. Policy diffuses through competition when a government's decision about whether to adopt the policy is motivated by the desire of its officials to achieve an economic advantage over other jurisdictions, or equivalently to prevent another jurisdiction from securing an advantage over it. There are two types of competition mechanisms: location choice competition and spillover induced competition. In location choice competition, governments seek to influence the location choice of individuals who are in position to acquire some good in more than one jurisdiction, usually their own and at least one other. With this type of diffusion, jurisdiction A adopts a policy, for example, lottery or restrictive labor immigration policy, to encourage individuals to acquire within a good that's beneficial for A to provide, or to go elsewhere to obtain a good that's costly for A to provide. A spillover induced competition. An adoption by government B has positive or negative effect on government A that changes A's expected net benefit from adopting. For example, B might adopt a pollution abatement project that would reduce pollution in both A and B. This positive spillover would encourage A to free ride on B's adoption, thereby lowering A's incentive to adopt. Other examples include trade, military mobilization, or commercial standards. Coercion. Government A is coerced into adopting a policy when a more powerful government B takes action that increases A's incentive, or in extreme case forces A to adopt. A study by Bush 2011 finds that a developing country is to adopt a gender quota for its legislator as the country's dependence on foreign aid from developed country increases, or when the country is exposed to international election monitors.